And it's 21:30 Beijing time. So my name is let's begin our online symposium. My name is Tianfu Wang. So I'm Associate Dean of the School of Social Sciences at Tsinghua University. I just get off my class. We know that Chile, Colombia, and Brazil are three major Latin American countries recently had a new election, and they have a new government. We know Latin America is a very important partner with China. So what will happen between the new governments in these three countries with China? What are the new opportunities for these three countries with China in the forthcoming years to come? So it's a very important issues. Today we are very happy to have three distinguished scholars from these three countries, along with two professors from China. We have this very interesting discussion online as a sponsor of this online discussion session. I'm very happy to welcome you all. And Professor Xiaoyang Tang, Professor Tang is our chair professor in the Department of International Relations in our school. And he will be the host of today's discussion. And I will pass on my speakerphone to Professor Tang. Xiaoyang, so.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dean Tianfu. And yeah, so thank you very much, Professor Wang. Can you hear me?
Xiaoyang, have you muted your?
Yeah, no, I have already unmuted myself. Can you hear me? Yeah, can everybody hear me? Yeah, so I think others can hear me. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so Professor Wang, no problem. Yeah, I think most of us can hear me clearly. And I will proceed as follows. Since we will first, according to our schedule, we will have our first speaker, Mr. Antonio Sanguino Paez. And because he has another important meeting in the president's house in half an hour, so we would first invite him to give us his speech, and also followed by several questions and quick answers. Okay, so Mr. Paez, now the floor is yours. Yeah, señor Paez, yeah, bienvenido. Nos, yeah, por favor, yeah, comienza. Yeah.
Bueno, muchas gracias por esta invitación, tanto a los amigos de China que han tenido la gentileza de invitarnos a compartir estas reflexiones o estas breves reflexiones sobre las relaciones de Colombia y China, su importancia tanto en la coyuntura actual como su importancia estratégica para Colombia, como también permitirme saludar a los colegas de Chile y de Brasil que entiendo y de Singapur que también nos acompañan. Así que mil gracias también a David que nos hace aquí de traductor y nos facilita esta conversación. Yo les pido de antemano excusas porque tenemos un debate en el Parlamento colombiano, en el Congreso de la República, en media hora, precisamente sobre el proyecto del metro de Bogotá, que está a cargo de un consorcio chino, y debo asistir con la alcaldesa mayor de la ciudad a ese compromiso.
Good morning to all of our colleagues from around the world. I want to thank you very, very much for sharing this space with me in which I can share some ideas and some perceptions of what the relations and very important relations are between Colombia and China, especially the strategy behind how we connect as Colombia, as the government works with China. I also want to apologize because in 30 minutes, I have a very important debate in the Congress of Colombia, especially about the Metro of Bogota. And in fact, the Bogota Metro is being built by a Chinese company.
Yeah, actually, before Mr. Sanguino goes on, I would like to just briefly introduce her profile. Mr. Antonino Sanguino Paez, he is currently the chief of the cabinet of the municipality of Bogota, Colombia. And he is also senator of the Republic of Colombia between 2018 and 2021. But meanwhile, he has also been a university professor, social researcher, and columnist. So thank you very much, Mr. Paez. Yeah, please, go ahead. Yeah.
Mil gracias. Yo empezaría diciendo que esta relación entre Colombia y China es muy importante. Primero porque corresponde a un mandato constitucional. Nuestra constitución política, la constitución de 1991, establece en su artículo 9 que las relaciones exteriores de Colombia, las relaciones internacionales, deben fundamentarse en la soberanía nacional, en el principio o en el respeto al principio de autodeterminación de los pueblos y en el reconocimiento de los principios del derecho internacional adoptados por Colombia.
Without a doubt, the relationship between Colombia and China is extremely, extremely important. As a matter of fact, within our constitution, the Constitution of 1991, Article number 9, we have certain rules or things that are in the Constitution, which, first of all, we have to have a sovereignty nation, and also it's focused in how we work with the world and we have international relations.
Y adicionalmente, o en segundo lugar, es muy importante esta relación por el énfasis que nuestra política exterior debe hacer en lo que se ha dado en llamar el multilateralismo, sobre todo para un país y un continente como el americano, como el latinoamericano, que siempre ha priorizado o incluso ha unilateralizado su relación con un bloque político y económico mundial, como es el bloque, o mejor, como es el liderazgo ejercido por un país tan cercano al contexto geográfico y político de Colombia y de América Latina como es Estados Unidos. Hoy es muy importante para el nuevo gobierno, este gobierno recién electo y recién posesionado en cabeza del presidente Gustavo Petro, consolidar un viraje hacia el multilateralismo. Y eso quiere decir no solo relaciones con Estados Unidos, sino también relaciones políticas, económicas y comerciales, culturales también, con Europa, y por supuesto con Asia y en particular con la República Popular China.
Without a doubt, continuing speaking about the importance of our relationship with the world, not only Colombia, but the continent, and especially how the current government, the new government, which is the Petro government, we're focused in something we call multilateralism. We have to work with more and more countries. It's not nothing new that Colombia is very close to the United States of America, but without a doubt, we have to aim and focus in relationships with other parts of the world, specifically how Dr. Sanguino said, and the Petro government is promoting this multilateral international cooperation. We're focused not only in working with the US, but also with Europe, Asia, and especially improving our relationship with the People's Republic of China.
Y si me lo permiten, hay una razón quizás más cercana a mi historia política y personal y a la historia política de Colombia. Y es que hoy el gobierno es un gobierno de una coalición de distintas expresiones de la izquierda colombiana y la República Popular China ha tenido mucho que ver con la aparición, con la existencia y con la presencia de organizaciones políticas de izquierda inspiradas en la experiencia de la República Popular China. Y eso, por supuesto, se expresa también en esta sensibilidad de la coalición del gobierno colombiano, del gobierno nacional, para ayudar a estrechar las relaciones políticas, económicas, culturales y comerciales con la República Popular China.
I would like to mention something very important. That's not only necessarily about the government, but also about my personal life as a professional and currently as someone that works for the government. I've been really close to the different types of leftist movements in the history of Colombia. And actually the current government, the government of Colombia, led by Petro, currently has different types of coalitions and tendencies of the leftist movement. And as we know, China, throughout its history, has had a lot of influence on the leftist movements around the world. And this, without a doubt, is manifested in our interest in working closer with China and, without a doubt, closing our ties with the People's Republic of China.
Ahora bien, situándonos en la relación concreta entre dos estados, como lo es el Estado colombiano y el Estado chino, la República Popular China, esta última se ha consolidado como el segundo socio comercial de Colombia en términos de exportaciones y se ha convertido en el primer origen de las importaciones del país. Es un dato especialmente relevante y quizás muy poco conocido. En términos de inversión, China se consolidó en el año 2021 en el primer inversionista del continente asiático en Colombia. Colombia y China cuentan con instrumentos bilaterales para fortalecer el comercio y la inversión. Tenemos un acuerdo comercial que data de 1981 que contempla la creación y el funcionamiento de una comisión mixta comercial y un acuerdo para la protección y promoción recíproca de las inversiones, acuerdo celebrado en el año 2008.
Mr. Sanguino is highlighting very important factors of the history of Colombia and China and wants to say two very important points. The first one, currently the People's Republic of China is the second most important commercial partner of Colombia. And also, since the year 2020, it's also the country from which Colombia imports the most in the whole world. Additionally, since 2021, the People's Republic of China is the #1 investor in Colombia of the Asian continent. Additionally, Mr. Sanguino is mentioning, how we have so many instruments that helps both nations work together with each other. He mentions that in 1981, there was an agreement in which it was made through a commission in which it promoted investment and a proper and friendly relationship between the People's Republic of China. Such agreement became more important and was actually implemented in the year of 2008. Instruments like these have helped their countries create a stronger relationship with each other.
Pero este progreso en el intercambio comercial de los años recientes, de 1981 hacia acá, entre Colombia y China, también plantea el desafío de reducir el déficit en la balanza comercial, lo que implica que es un déficit todavía desfavorable para Colombia, lo que implicaría ampliar el volumen y la baraja, además de los productos de exportación o de las exportaciones colombianas y de la complementariedad de las economías, de la economía china con la economía colombiana.
Ever since 1981, like I just mentioned, that we created this instrument that helped us work with each other, we've had certain challenges. One of the challenges that Colombia has in its relation with China is to make the commercial balance more equal. This creates a challenge for us in which we have to seek more channels and opportunities that helps Colombia also level up that balance and promote the exports of Colombian products to China, for example.
Debemos ampliar las exportaciones agrícolas de Colombia, de productos agrícolas de Colombia, con productos, por supuesto, de alta calidad, principalmente en variedades de café especial, que es un producto insignia de nuestras exportaciones, de flores, de derivados del cacao, del banano, del aguacate. Así como también fortalecer las importaciones o el acceso a nuevas frutas tropicales como el limón Tahití, la pasifloras, el mango, la piña, entre otros. Es decir, que la reanimación, la recuperación del campo colombiano, que es un propósito del gobierno del presidente Gustavo Petro, deben tener una vocación exportadora, no solo de seguridad alimentaria interna, y en eso el mercado chino es un destino excepcionalmente importante para esas exportaciones de Colombia.
Among some of the most important exports of Colombia to China, and what we should focus in, it's products that derive from the agricultural sector. We mentioned, for example, products like coffee. You know, coffee is one of our most important products in Colombia. It's of very, very high quality. We also have cacao, avocado, flowers, etc. And it's very important to keep in mind a very important point. The Petro government is focused in that relationship with the agricultural and the fields of Colombia, that, of course, we need to give access to new products from Colombia and China, but in general, also create opportunities for China in Colombia. But bearing in mind that the Petro government is very, very focused in promoting and helping the fields, the agricultural aspect of the Colombian economy.
Igualmente debemos dinamizar el relacionamiento, las relaciones entre nuestras autoridades sanitarias, la participación de empresas, de firmas, de ciudadanos colombianos en eventos, ferias, seminarios, como particularmente puede ser la participación de Colombia como país invitado en la 4ª edición de la Feria Internacional de Importaciones, así como también el posicionamiento de plataformas de e-commerce y de participación en eventos sectoriales, por ejemplo, en la industria textil o en la industria de la moda, en la que también Colombia ha venido desarrollando una importante vocación exportadora.
Additionally, some other aspects in which Colombia is aiming, and we hope we can work together with China, is, for example, health institutions that promote sanity or health programs in our countries. Also, the exchange of companies from both countries. Also promote the participation of events of Chinese and also Colombian citizens that could take part in this kind of events. And actually, there's certain sectors of our industry that have been very important that we'd like to continue to promote. For example, fashion, textile industries, and also e-commerce. This would be referring to technological aspects of this potential cooperation with China.
Y en sentido inverso, Colombia debe mantener el interés en la promoción de la inversión china en nuestro país, que hasta ahora ha venido ocurriendo en sectores como las telecomunicaciones, los hidrocarburos, la infraestructura, la tecnología, entre otros.
And without a doubt, it's also very important for Colombia to maintain the investments of China that are coming to our country, especially the investment of China in Colombia, which is focused, for example, in technology, telecommunications, and a diverse group of investments that are being made by Chinese companies in Colombia.
De acuerdo con ProColombia, a propósito de este asunto de las inversiones chinas en Colombia, han llegado al país alrededor de 38 proyectos chinos en los últimos 3 años, por un valor de 2.048 millones de dólares en campos como la infraestructura, la minería y la energía. Para destacar el caso, por ejemplo, de Xi Jinping, que adquirió la mina de Buriticá, la licitación que ganó el consorcio chino Harbour Energy Company para la construcción de la primera línea del metro de Bogotá, el proyecto de Regiotran a cargo de China Civil Energy Construction Corporation y los proyectos que ganó Trina Solar en la subasta de energías renovables, entre los proyectos de inversión o de presencia china más importantes hoy en Colombia.
So according to some numbers and information we've received from ProColombia, in the past 3 years, we've had over 38 very, very important projects. Especially, for example, there's been a very big project led by Zijin Mining Company in the largest gold mine in Colombia, which is called Buriticá. Also, the very first line of the metro, it's being led and has been acquired, this project, by the company China Harbor. And just also other examples of great projects that are being led by Chinese companies in our country are, for example, the Regiotram, which is being made in Colombia, and also several other projects related to the use of renewable sources of energy.
Y en los últimos 2 años, sobre todo a partir de agosto del 2021, a propósito de el impacto de la pandemia del coronavirus en Colombia, la alcaldesa mayor de Bogotá, Claudia López, en agosto del 2021, precisamente, se reunió y ha venido sosteniendo reuniones con la farmacéutica Sinovac BioNTech, con la expectativa de instalar una fábrica de vacunas en Bogotá, con el apoyo y, digamos, y como resultado de una relación de cooperación y de trabajo conjunto con esta farmacéutica china.
Another very important example I would like to share with you is that in the past 2 years, specifically in August of 2021, the mayor of Bogotá, Mrs. Claudia Lopez, had a very important meeting with Sinovac of course, the producer of the COVID-19 vaccine, because it's possible that Sinovac BioNTech is considering the construction of a factory in Bogota to produce the vaccines, and which clearly this is just an example of the cooperation we've been having with Chinese companies.
De igual manera, nuestra Secretaría de Cultura de la capital de Bogotá y nuestra Secretaría de Educación han venido adelantando actividades culturales y educativas, no solo para fomentar y para dar a conocer importantes hitos de la cultura china, sino también para promover la enseñanza del mandarín y la promoción del intercambio cultural con la República Popular China, como una manera también de abrir a nuestros estudiantes y jóvenes, abrir sus ojos a la riqueza cultural que representa y a la tradición cultural que representa para la humanidad la historia y la cultura china.
Another very important example I'm going to share with you is the mission that has been led by the Education and Cultural Secretariats of Bogota, in which we've been seeking more and more channels in which we can share and teach more about the Chinese culture. But actually, recently, we've had the possibility of, through clearly the Secretariat of Culture and Education, teach Chinese Mandarin to young students in Bogota and in Colombia. This clearly is an example of how cooperation between both nations has been developing. And this clearly helps our students and the young community of our country of Bogota. And most importantly, it allows our students, our kids, to learn and study the beautiful and traditional and rich culture of the history of China.
Y más recientemente, resulta muy importante en el contexto del multilateralismo de nuestras relaciones exteriores y de las convocatorias que ha venido haciendo el presidente Gustavo Petro al mundo, pues resulta muy relevante que podamos contar con la participación y el acompañamiento de la República Popular China en causas que constituyen verdaderos clamores de la humanidad, particularmente la protección, la recuperación y la protección de nuestra Amazonía, que constituye el principal pulmón del planeta. Y por supuesto que la presencia china en Colombia, como ha venido ocurriendo con el sistema de transporte público de la ciudad y con otras inversiones, se coloque en el horizonte de la necesaria transición energética que nos permite enfrentar juntos y de manera responsable, China y Colombia, la crisis climática y el calentamiento global.
Giving importance to this concept of multilateralism and promoted by the current government, the Petro government, it's been great news and information that we've received, in that we know that we will count with China's support in the protection of the Amazonas, the Amazon region of Colombia. As you may know, the Amazon is clearly like the lung, it's how the earth is able to breathe. And this is very important for us, being able to cooperate with China in this aspect, because this helps us in this energy transition in which we're seeking to protect our country, the world, and counting with China's support is very, very important for us.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias y por supuesto muy contento de estar aquí, de haber podido intercambiar estas reflexiones y muy interesado, por supuesto, en seguir manteniendo una relación de conversación y de intercambio con ustedes y en general con la República Popular China. Gracias.
Thank you very, very much for this opportunity of sharing this insight, this information with you. And without a doubt, it's very important for me. It's very important for us to continue strengthening the ties, the friendship between us and the People's Republic of China.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Baez and also David for the translation. Does Mr. Baez still have some time for question and answer? Or, señor Baez, tiene... David, could you
等一下，老师，不好意思，稍等一下。当老师三个学生说，如果你们可以第一个或者两个问题，就时间来得及，但是要就一个或者两个。
Okay.
对的，对的。
Okay. Any questions from audience or from our panelist for Mr. Baez? For maybe I will have a maybe quick question. So Mr. Baez, he mentioned that the President Pedro is now leaning towards the left. And how will then Colombia work between China and the US, since Colombia actually has such a strong connection with the US for a long time? And then what will be the current new government's strategy to work between China and the US, since the US is also kind of competing with China in international global affairs?
Señor Sanguino, esta nueva tendencia quizás de un poco más de izquierda del gobierno Petro, y pues teniendo en cuenta que hay una competencia a veces entre Estados Unidos y China, ¿de qué forma Colombia va a lograr situarse en ese punto medio? ¿Cómo podemos pues incentivar ese punto en el que usted muy bien mencionó que hay una tendencia quizás más de izquierda, pero que Estados Unidos siempre ha estado muy cerca? ¿Cómo puede Colombia ubicarse en ese punto medio entre Colombia, entre Estados Unidos y China?
Hay un contexto, a mi juicio, favorable para poder consolidar una posición equidistante de Colombia entre China y Estados Unidos. Y es precisamente la existencia de una especie de ola de gobiernos de izquierda y de centroizquierda que no necesariamente están alineados, como en el pasado, con los intereses de Estados Unidos, y que más bien hacen un esfuerzo por construir un bloque de países con una posición relativamente más autónoma en la geopolítica internacional. Y ello yo creo que va a conducir, va a derivar en una relación de mayor autonomía frente a Estados Unidos y de mayor apertura a una relación multilateral con otros bloques de poder en el contexto mundial, en particular el bloque asiático y en particular la República Popular China y por supuesto el bloque europeo. Y eso es benéfico para nuestras democracias, para nuestros estados y para nuestros pueblos.
There is a very important context and point I want to share, and it's there's a certain tendency in the continent of more and more perhaps leftist-oriented governments, which are not strictly aligned with the perceptions or the ideas of the government of the United States. We are seeking, as I mentioned, the governments which this leftist tendency to build a more central and autonomous position, which help us create, as we've mentioned earlier, multilateralism, creating this multilateral cooperation in which we can be in the middle and perhaps know that we're seeking to work closer with Asia, specifically with the People's Republic of China, obviously the bloc of Europe, and this without a doubt is very helpful and will provide great results to the democracies of our countries.
Okay. Yeah, gracias, muchas gracias por la contesta. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, so David, I think that we do not want to hold Mr. Baez for too long. Yeah. Okay, so and by the way, the translator is David Hanna, who's a graduate from Tsinghua University as well. Yeah,
nice to meet you all. Tsinghua University is my second home. Dr. Tang Xiaoyang was my professor, and I was very happy to be here. 非常感谢老师，我们抱歉练习，再见。
Right. Yeah, let's keep in touch. Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Lisa.
Okay, bye. Take care. Okay, now our second speaker is Professor Guillermo Maciero. And I would like to first introduce Professor Maciero. So Professor Maciero, he is a professor in the University of Sao Paulo. And wait a minute. Yes. Yeah, let me just get. So he's a professor of business administration at the School of Economics, Business and Accounting at the University of Sao Paulo, and he holds a doctorate in business administration, and of Fundación Getulio Vargas. And so far, he has already 7 books published as an author or organizer. And also he has written more than 30 articles published in national and international journals. And so his research covers a lot of topics, including theory and functions of business administration, internationalization of Brazilian, South Korean, and Chinese companies from the 1990s onwards, and economic planning and development in Latin America and East Asia, etc. And we know that Brazil just had a recent election, and President Silva Lula was re-elected again. And it's a very exciting moment to see how this old and new leader will lead direct this bilateral tie between China and Brazil. So Professor Maciero, so very sincere gratitude for joining us, and we are looking forward to listening your insights. Please unmute yourself. Please.
Okay, now it's a pleasure for me to be here, and I want to say thank you very much for the invitation. And I will try to be as quick as possible, because my view of the things are more business oriented rather than political oriented. Then I want to share some slides to guide my discussions. Where they are here. Okay. Hope everybody
we
is able to see my screen. And the main questions that we have today in our symposium is to discuss if the new governance plans to follow a different foreign policy. In what ways will these countries interact with China? These countries, the 3 ones that are represented here, and what can be expected in the future. Then what we have, we have new leadership in Brazil, Colombia, and Chile. But really, really new is just in Chile. the new president has 36 years. Our president, re-elected Luiz Inácio da Silva, has 77, almost twice the age of the youngest president. And Gustavo Petro, 62. And I'm calling attention for the years of the leaders because it seems quite important. New leaders or young leaders are more against the status quo, are more fighters than the ones that has a long history of articulations or whatever. Then in the three cases, we have also the influence of the eldest one, the leadership of Luiz Inácio da Silva. But it's hard to measure if a president of Brazil has more or less influence in the neighboring countries than other really, really old and experienced leaders like your leader, or like the leader of you in US, or the leaders in US. But that is a point in question. Then we must expect, at least from my point of view, more change coming from the younger leaders than from the older leaders. But this is just a guess, okay? News: Brazil Lula's to attend COP27 Climate Change Summit. Norway to resume Brazil's aid how to go over deforestation. Xi ready to take China-Brazil ties to new level after Lula elected. These are the news that came out as soon as Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was declared the new president of Brazil. Brazil and China are both members of the BRICS group of emerging economies, which Beijing as, if I take this, as Beijing sees as a potential counterweight in a US-dominated world order, NDTV. Well, news. Every day we have new news, and every day we are following the news. But my point is that despite of the news, good or bad ones, we have some realities. And what are them? The trade. Let me put again here. Okay. The China, let's go back one. Okay, the trades between China and Latin American countries are increasing, and they have been increasing in the last 10 years. With Brazil, nowadays, China represents 32% of the trades and increasing, while US just 20 and decreasing, 21. But trades are always been unbalanced around the world. Then trade is the investments. And the Chinese outward foreign direct investments is not showing a stable investments in number of projects as well as in the number of dollars, at least in Brazil. I don't have the numbers of Colombia and Chile, but as you can see in the graph, the number of the projects have been randomly high or lower, depends on your point of view, and the number of the value of them also moved from 2010, that was the highest value, to half 10 years later. And we have in different years, different numbers. Then there is not a stable trend of the investments. And this means in some way that Brazil is not part, or at least is not an important partner of the external Chinese policy, because there is not a stable trend in investments. Brazil is not growing its investments in China because it's quite a poor country, and our companies went to China a long time ago, and they are not going anymore because there is not much more investments to do over there. They are not investing even in Brazil. But the Chinese ones are spreading their ties around the world. And in some specific case also in Brazil, like in this new, before. Page down and up. Here. Okay, here. Then what are our questions of today? Do these new governments plans to follow different foreign policies? In what ways will these countries interact with China? My point of view is yes, but not much different from the past. They will be more proactive than reactive. Historically, there is a strong sentiment that they will be progressist governments. However, Brazil, Chile, and Colombia are commodity export-driven countries, low value-added products and services. Their imports from China and elsewhere are of manufactured goods, high value-added products and services. Brazil, I don't know, Chile and Colombia, have been passively integrating its economy in the international market. And there is always, but conservative forces are very, very, very strong in the region. And you have the picture of the cover of The Economist showing one of our conservative leaders. So what can we expect? Let me move this to the other side. Okay. What can be expected in the future? I would say that can be expected diversification of trade and investments relations of China with Latin American countries. Improving knowledge exchange and cooperations in the development of IT industries. I would say leapfrogging partnerships in the development of new industries, electric cars, solar energy, and others. And basically, our hopes, at least the Brazilian ones, are concentrated in working toward improving reciprocal knowledge in IT, information technology industries. There are some recent projects going on, and that are the ones that are letting us with more hopes in having a more reciprocal exchange with China as well as with other countries, but specifically with China, because China up to now has been just replacing other, and we are not making the change that we need to make to have a more equal and reciprocal relationships. And this is my presentations, and I'm open to discuss all of them with you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Obrigado, Professor Maciel. Obrigado. And yeah, I think we will first move to our next two speakers, and then we will gather the questions together. So our next speaker will be Professor Yongchao Li. And Professor Li, he is a professor of the School of Government and director of the Center for International Relations Studies at the University of Development, Chile. And he holds a doctorate in politics at Complutense University of Madrid, Spain. And his research interests are theories of international relations, global governance, Sino-Latin American relations. And he has written many books and journal articles, such as the Chilean parliamentary diplomacy in deepening relations between Chile and China. And besides, he has held numerous projects in domestic and international institutions. And very glad to see you, Professor Li, again online. So we missed you because you visited us before the COVID, and we hope to have you back. But now, please, yeah, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Tang, for inviting me to join this conversation, this symposium on emerging opportunity between China and Latin America. So thank you very much. And we hope the COVID pass as soon as possible to return to China, to meet each other with you, with Professor Shi, with Xiaoyuan, and join together. So, well, firstly, I want to thank everyone for the organization of this event. And let me start reflection about the new opportunity of the relation between China and Latin America. Well, China and Latin America might be far away geographically speaking, and but there is much we have in common. Well, thanks to the advancement in communication in the current globalized world, there are increasing ties between our regions. In that sense, our duty as academic and the scholar is to help bridge the gap between the faraway lands. We live in a troublesome time. There is a significant uncertainty, and one way to contribute to our society is to have more and better dialogue. And despite the distance and the language barrier, China and Latin America must understand that the cooperation and mutual respect are the way forward. Again, I want to thank Tsinghua University for this opportunity to share my some reflection about Latin America and China. Well, having said that, today I come to discuss our about the standard in some issues in international relations and the international business. I think for a long time, Latin America has simply adopted the rule and the regulation designed by the developed world without considering its own institution, the social reality, and the productivity capacity. For example, during the 1980s and the early 90s, following what has been called the Washington Consensus, most of the content and most of the continent adopt the theory of economic policy prescription considered to constitute the standard of liberal economy. While the standard might make sense, the remarkable beneficial in some countries, depending on the context, institutional framework, and culture. It has been demonstrated that it might be a recipe for disaster without adopting the aforementioned norm and the local situations. Does it sound very and overly dramatic? Well, it might, but there is a good evidence to support that the Venezuelan and Argentinian collapse in the 1980 and 90 are linked to the death economy policy. Some of the probably think that the true reason behind this economic disaster was the lack of strict implementation of Washington consensus and the liberal economy agenda. But let us say you are right. But what would have been the alternative to implement an impossible economic transformation in country with a strong political opposition? Unlikely. We all know that the nature of politics is what is possible. Accordingly, if the success of such a standard risk of the strict implementation of an impossible agenda, what does that tell us about the viability of this norm? Necessary that would make those norms a terrible idea, a nasty one. Well, to clarify, I am not advocating against the international norm and standard. On the contrary, my argument is that if we ought to promote standard and norm that help our nation in the context of globalization and international anarchy to cooperate more effectively, those norms need to be anchored in the local reality of each state. In this field, one of the most relevant objectives today is to discuss the regarding of cybersecurity. Regarding the cybersecurity, we all know the economic implication of adopting digital and new technology to produce capacity of our nations. The future economy growth will be determined by how fast we can adopt a new and novel production of methods, incorporating elements such as cloud computing, the 5G, the artificial intelligence, and more. Well, in this context, the cybercrime has proliferated exponentially. The government around the globe are rushing to create the proper mechanism to protect their citizens and their economy. In these few years, the Latin America have been no exception. Multiple countries are discussing about the new cybersecurity law and creating public institutions to safeguard the personal data. As Chile, now we are discussing about the new cybersecurity law in the Congress. In this moment, in this week. Firsthand, this might sound promising. Nonetheless, just like that's probably happening, several countries are simply copying or replicating the regulation designed elsewhere that respond to the social relative of places like the United States and Europe. In that sense, we know that the Western world has been for several years promoting a strategy of competition with China. The trade war and the innumerable restrictions posed on China economy, including the Huawei ban, show that the norm and the regulation are often anything but neutral. In that sense, China is a #1 trading partner for most of the region. Chile, I think in Colombia and Brazil too. Well, additionally, it's an increasingly relevant source of investment and technology. Taking that in consideration, instead of simple adoption, important norm and standard, I think it's not reasonable to consider the social economic reality of the country. Well, that's the big question for Latin America. We have to adopt that norm from the developed country. Well, Latin America, not only as a region, but also individually does not have the capability to go to with the great power of our time. Consequently, given the current geopolitical tension, we do not want to choose between our friend and partnership with China or United States or Europe. We need autonomy to make our decisions. Back in 2019, for example, the Secretary of the State, Mike Pompeo, United States, visit Chile. And during this visit, he lobbied against Huawei and Chinese technology investment in Chile. Some Chilean politicians were see and to listen what he had to say, advocating for security risk. The problem with this situation is that great power often use the influence to frame political issues as technical one. In this case, US used its position to advocate for political restriction masked as technical concern. Do not get me wrong, but technical knowledge and expertise should be at the top of the list when we discussing the issues. Specifically, when we talk about something so crucial for future development of our society as cybersecurity, we must first consider the value of technical regulations. We need to understand the importance of protecting the personal data and critical infrastructure information as pillar of a new future economy and social development founded on the basic interoperability, which provide the necessary traceability of act and the integrity of the information, giving the necessary legal certainty to all digital acts of the state, individual, company, and either foreign or local. The problem is that even we know as a region the relevance of having this discussion, we have not enough to update our legal framework. Latin American currently considered a major disaster for cyber attack and cybercrime. By 2021, Latin America and Caribbean country, we have experienced more than 28.9 billion cyber attack attempt, a 600% increase over 2020. So cybersecurity represent enable platform for social development and the digital economy. This implies unceasing work as it will require a permanent updating of our IT system and especially continuing training of society as whole. For effective defense against the cyber attack, it is imperative not to close ourselves and our technology, but we must always be free to choose the one that best suits the interest and the needs of each other. The public policy must defend the principle of technology neutrality without promoting or encouraging discrimination between them. The more options there are, and the more competition is generated in the market, the more protected will be from cyber attack. Since it will also generate more investment in research and development, which will bring most advanced technologies. So the security of the network and the system on which cybercrime are committed in an essentially technical matter deal with technically and overcome with technical solutions. Therefore, considering the unrelated to empirical evidence should have no place either in public policy or in regulation, since they distort the meaning and essence of the network and the system security protection, turning into a net of geopolitical interests that respond to other motivation and do not have the preservation of the cybersecurity as the primary purpose. Well, to conclude, I will quickly summarize my argument. Norm and standard are variable and desirable. They significantly help developing nations adapt to an ever-changing world and take the best experience elsewhere. Nonetheless, great power often use their influence to mask their political agenda and promote the supposedly the technical norm and standard and the regulations. Well, this is not a new phenomenon, but we can observe that is the latest interaction in the current discussion regarding the cybersecurity. In that regard, the cybersecurity is one of the pillars of the future economy development, and we must, to put it simple, get it right. Otherwise, our economy will suffer. Consequently, Latin America, we need to adopt policy that best suit our culture, our society, our economic system, without simply copying and passing regulation and norm from elsewhere. We need autonomy to regulate and adopt the technical and neutral law to secure the economic growth and the prosperity. Well, in that sense, we must able to do business with China, with Europe, with United States, always considering our interests. So thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure to share with my opinion about the new trend, the emerging opportunity between China and Latin America and new relations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Li, for the excellent speech. So it's very interesting that you and Professor Mastiero both mentioned the importance of IT sector, so the information and the cybersecurity. But also as well as together with Mr. Paez, then you talked about how the Latin American countries should then find their autonomy and among this power competition. So we will discuss about these questions after our last speaker, Professor Guo's speech. So let me just introduce Professor Guo Jie. Is also an old friend of our department, and he teaches at the School of International Studies at Peking University, our neighbor, and she holds a doctorate in international relations as well as from Peking University. And her research mainly focuses on Latin American politics and diplomacy, China-Latin American relations, as well as comparative politics. And he also, from 2013 to 2016, she worked as a visiting fellow in institutions and organizations such as the Kettering Foundation, Inter-American Dialogue, Universidad del Pacífico in Peru, and Universidade de Sao Paulo in Brazil. I think, yeah, so actually we got to know Professor Maciero also through Professor Guo's help. And as well as in Argentina and in Mexico. So Professor Guo's publications include 4 monographs and around 40 academic articles. And yeah, so yeah, let's welcome Professor Guo to speak.
Okay, thank you, Professor Tang. Hi, good morning or good evening, everyone. First, I want to thank the School of Social Sciences of Tsinghua University for the kind invitation, and also thank the 3 speakers for sharing your insights on today's topic. I did learn a lot. Well, next, I will share my views on the themes of the conference and also some related issues that have been addressed or not yet covered by the 3 keynote speakers. Hoping to provide some kind of Chinese perspective and interpretation. And first, I want to share some a very preliminary assessment of the direction of the political ecology in recent years in several Latin American countries, including Chile, Colombia, and Brazil, and even in the region as a whole. As we have seen in the last 4 years, the Latin American left has won electoral victories in 8 countries: Mexico, Argentina, Bolivia, Peru, Honduras, Chile, Colombia, and Brazil. And many people talk about the so-called new pink tide, which I personally, I don't particularly agree with. Rather, I think this shift in Latin American electoral politics since 2018 is mostly a reboot and continuation of a regional trend that started at the end of the last century when Latin America's left wing gained power one by one and won successive power after a brief setback. The difference is the wave right now is more heterogeneous, and there's no guarantee that it will last. There are basically 3 different scenarios for the 8 countries when it comes to electoral politics. In first, right-wing forces lost the support at the end of a governing circle. Some are largely attributed to economic issues like Argentina, while others were a combination of political, economic, social, and even cultural factors. In Chile, for instance, a relatively rare large-scale political upheaval has been the key contributing factor. Second is the rerunning election, like in Bolivia. Lastly, there's the real breakthrough of leftist forces in domestic elections, as in Colombia, which we're talking about, and also Mexico, and even to some extent Honduras. The Latin American left that is coming to power or about to come into power has distinctly a different political ideology than the previous wave. If we look at the agendas of Chilean President Gabriel Boric and Peruvian President Pedro Castillo, the differences are pretty striking. The former is based on social democracy and closely linked to post-materialist demand generated by the new social movements, which have changed the tone of left-wing discourse, while the latter follows Marxist discourse filled with the Plato worldviews and indigenous traditions. And he's also culturally conservative. Different political ideologies have accordingly led to different political programs, which are particularly evident in progressive issues like environmental protection, sustainable development, gender equality, and minority rights. There's also a lot more pressure and challenges facing this wave of Latin American left. The COVID-19 is an important factor, of course, but it's not the only and most important one. In Argentina's presidential election next year, the left has a 50-50 or 50-50 chance of keeping power. So it's hard to tell if Panama and the Dominican Republic will join this left-wing wave in 2023 and 24 respectively, as some have suggested. As a second point, I would like to share some of my observations about the topics in relation to the new foreign policy orientations or possible directions of the current governments in Chile and Colombia, and a few others like the Lula government in Brazil starting next year. First of all, what does this wave of leftists mean for regional unity? As we have seen that Latin America made a lot of progress in regional integration during the first decade of the 21st century. And in the years after 2014 and especially 2015, there were lots of regressive trends, like Brazil's suspension, its involvement or engagement with CELAC, and the loss of ALBA's dynamic and also embarrassing situation of UNASUR, whose major members, as we know, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Paraguay, and Peru, formed another group, the group of Lima in 2017. And 2 years later, the same countries plus Ecuador and Guyana formed BLOSUR, which basically replaced UNASUR. Will the growth of left-wing regimes reverse the situation? Hopefully, the current political changes in Latin America will contribute positively to the regional unity. But frankly, I'm not very sure about that. There are at least a few reasons for this. For one, each country has a troubled the domestic agenda, and no one has yet succeeded in materializing campaign promises, whether it's AMLO, who has a super high approval rating, or Castillo, who has a very low approval rating. And there are no exception in Chile, with the new president, Bolic's approval rating down a lot since he took office because of the inexperience of the cabinet, polarized Congress, rising prices, and also unrest in the South, and also the new rejection of the new constitution draft by referendum in last September. For Colombia and Brazil, implementing the peace agreement and integrating a divided country is the most important thing on the agendas. Whether these countries and the governments can put in the time and energy for regional cooperation is the question, I think. Also, the different attitude towards Venezuelan issue is another obstacle. As more left-wing governments have taken power, we have seen some countries reopen their relations with Maduro administration, but others haven't, such as Chile. In fact, Bolic has been very critical of the Maduro regime. Likewise, Colombian President Gustavo Petro is a self-claimed defender of democracy, but there are sort of nuances between the two guys. It seems that Gustavo Petro prefers to reach out and engage and push for change instead of just criticizing. And on November 1st, we say he made a high-profile trip to Venezuela, which was praised by New York Times as marking a new chapter in the global approach to Venezuela. According to the reports, Petro said he came to Venezuela to reestablish the border between the two countries and to discuss the protection of the Amazon first issue, calling for Venezuela to return to the inter-American human rights system and rejoin the democratic society. Lula's new government is expected to take a more balanced approach that will hopefully harmonize Venezuela's harsh relationship with certain countries in the region and promote the unity at the regional level when it comes to power next year. But for now, we can just hope. Certainly, from the end of last century to 2014 or 15, when the Latin American left was in power, we clearly saw a trend toward diplomatic independence from the United States. Leftist regimes that have come to power since 2018 may continue to show a preference for independent diplomacy, as we saw at the Summit of Americas in Los Angeles this year. But they are still generally friendly with the Biden administration. Colombia and Chile in particular are not just the traditional partners or allies of the United States in the region. They also share much of Biden's progressive agenda. Mexico, which is the US biggest and most important economic partner in the region, and also Argentina, which is still in debt and has a lot of domestic, especially economic problems, are not likely to return to their uncooperative way as they used to be. The Brazilian government will probably return to the foreign policy of Lula's previous administrations, broad international agenda, but probably not too aggressive. Bottom line here, we will see a balance of power this time around and less anti-Americanism. Finally, there's the concern about what the changing Latin American political ecology means for China's relationship with the region. Personally, I have some very initial speculations that I would like to share with you. And to start with, China has generally been more welcoming of the Latin American left in power than the other way around. Although China has not clearly indicated its ideological preference or preconditions when interacting with Latin American countries, but actually in practice, left and center-left governments in Latin America tend to take a more positive stance in developing relations with China than their right or center-right counterparts. Secondly, for large countries or big countries like Brazil or Argentina, left-wing governments would be beneficial for China to continue or restart its development of great power relationship with those countries, not just a bilateral relationship. China's relation with Chile has been relatively stable and is not expected to change significantly during Bolic's administration. And China's relations with Colombia, for conceivable reasons, have not been as high or as warm as they should have been for a long time. However, some recent advancement has occurred. The former president Ivan Duque held what the Chinese ambassador to Colombia described as a historical meeting in Beijing 2 years ago, and then made a series of achievements in bilateral business between the two countries. With Gustavo Petro taking office this year, China-Colombia relationship might continue to grow. A past experience has convinced China that the Latin American left is generally more interested in regional coalitions or unity. For this reason, China is likely to expect that the collective cooperation between China and Latin America with the China Select Forum as the main platform will emerge from the difficult situation of the past 4 years and gain new momentum, especially in the implementation of the new version of the Joint Action Plan signed at the third ministerial meeting of the China Select Forum late last year. Overall, China is increasingly looking at its Latin American relations from a more strategic perspective within the new international context. The last 2 decades have been one of the fastest growing periods for China-Latin American relations. And China has gained a lot of experience dealing with different types of regimes in the region, especially left and center-left ones. In light of China's Sino-US relations, it is likely that the more US elements or factors will seep into the bilateral relationship between China and Latin American relations in the future. But as a scholar, I prefer to keep an optimistic mindset and think about some possible positives. I think it is very important for China to objectively assess the US relationship with Latin America. As always, in Latin America, whether the left or right comes to power, geopolitical factors matter. At the moment, we see that the 3 ruling and soon to be ruling leftist regimes that are the focus of today's discussion share some concerns about progressive agendas, especially environmental, climate change, and energy transition. It might inspire them to reshape their relationship with the United States. And it also provides some new opportunities or gives some new momentum to China's to their relationship with China. Maybe, and I don't know if this is possible, if China, the United States, and Latin America can achieve sort of a trilateral or 3-party collaboration in this related areas. It might ease some tensions in this regard between China and the United States, especially in this region. So that's all. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Guo. I think you have your very comprehensive view on the political trend in Latin America and its implication for China-Latin America relationship. In fact, we talked a lot about the Latin America's new politics because of this new leadership. But in fact, China also just finished its party Congress, although there was the president was not changed, but we also see this, we can expect some some new stage and new policies from the Chinese side. And I think from all the speakers, we hear a very important topic, namely in this big power competition and China, US, and Latin America, how these trilateral relations be handled. And here I can see already a question from online audience from Christy Kenyon. And she asked Professor Li, and you mentioned that there is a pressure from the US in Chile on Chinese investments. Can you tell us more on this topic? So maybe Professor Li, could you please start with this Q&A session?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Regarding your question, in the last four years, the United States, since the trade war initiated from the United States with China, the United States has pressured a lot Chile to avoid Chinese investment in the country, in Chile, above all in the area of technology, energy, critical infrastructure, and mining. It relates Chinese investment to the master plan of the Communist Party to as a macabre plan to stay with the whole country. And that idea generates some ignorance and some confusion about in Chile. And as I said, 2019, the Secretary of the State, Mike Pompeo, visit Chile in that time. And what the main reason that he visited Chile? Because in that time, Chile is deciding about the 5G. They use the Chinese standard, or the 5G with the European standard, or the United States standard. Well, in that visit, he openly lobbied against Huawei and Chinese technology company in Chile. They have in that visit, I remember, he had a huge and long agenda to visit different authority, different enterprise. And his idea is to avoid the most quantity possible from the Chinese investment in Chile. Well, as I said, some Chilean politicians went to listen the word from the Mike Pompeo because he accusing the Chinese technology is fail in security, so it have the security risk if they take the Chinese 5G, the Huawei 5G. I think the problem with that situation is that the great power often use their influence to frame political issue and technical one. And in that cases, as I said, US used the position to advocate for political restriction masked as technical concern. And in Chile, we have the second open lobby from the US to Chile is the 2021, the last year. Chile gave up the accepting the Chinese company won the tender due to the clear threat from the US to remove Chile the visa waiver. So that threat was enough for Chilean government to reject the Chinese company. So in Chile, we have two very clear pressure from the US government to reject all Chinese investment in the area of technology and energy and the critical infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for the answer. And there's a related question from Vasilis. And that has been, yeah, so he asked, I would like to ask the scholars if they consider the Monroe Doctrine as being anachronistic or still applies. Does the US have a strategic veto power over certain decisions of Latin American states? So maybe Professor Maciero, would you like to answer that question to see whether the US, what's the influence of the US on Brazil and also on Latin America in general? Do they still have veto power related to Monroe Principle? Hello, Professor Maciero. I think.
But there is a strong influence of America, for sure. They have been the most developed countries, and they have been spreading their investments in all Latin American economies. And this is the reason that I'm asking for more and more stable investments of China in Latin American countries. Then it causes me an unbelievable, I would say, at least a challenging thought that China has been developing IT industries and spreading them through all the neighboring countries, especially the ones that signed the memorandum for centuries, I would say. But my question is, why China is not interested in signing MOUs, considering the Belt and Road Initiative to be standard?
I think the connection with Brazil is not very good at this moment. Hello, Professor Maciero, can you still hear us? Okay, Professor Maciero. Yeah, maybe we can the moderator unmute Professor Maciero. Hello, actually, Professor Maciero. I think.
Okay. Okay. I listen. I do listen. No.
Yes. Yeah. Now we can listen. We can hear you. Yeah. Sorry. I think we didn't hear you maybe for about 2 minutes. Could you please?
Okay. Then let's go back. No,
Hello, Professor. Okay. Yeah. You know, yeah, if we just unmute you. I think now the connection is better, but could you please unmute yourself?
Here. Now I think we are back.
Much
Okay,
better.
sorry, but this is our problem in underdeveloped countries. We are not able to manage the technology developed in developed countries. Or if so, we do that not as in a good way, I would say. But I was trying to argue that it seems that China is not much interested in Latin American countries. And the main reason to think in that way is that more than 150 countries have already signed MOUs to be part of the Belt and Road Initiative that, for my point of view, is the best foreign policies of China for centuries. And one of the main pillars of this initiative is to build digital corridors that they will be shortening distances and closing the gaps of misunderstanding between civilizations, cultures, and countries. Okay, but China seems that is not much interest in having MOUs with Brazil. I don't know, Colombia and Chile, but I think they don't have it. And that, I think, is not by the strong influence of US in these countries, but it's just because China is not interested in standing the routes to reach South America. Then sure, again, the influence of US in these three countries is strong, but they don't have any veto power over the governments from the right or from the left. But this government from the right or from the left must have a better understanding with the Chinese country, with the Chinese government, and be more like the others, I would say. and having the same exchange like others. That's it.
Thank you, Professor Maciero. In fact, Professor Guo, Professor Li, yeah, because Professor Maciero mentioned that China is not interested in signing MOU with Latin American countries. Professor Guo, do you think so? And also, what do you think about the U.S. influence in Latin American countries? You have something to add?
Yeah, I would like to say something about the moral doctrine question. And I think you may recall that in 2013, John Kerry declared I remember at the meeting of the OAS that the era of moral doctrine is over. In 2019, Trump's team made it clear that they were not ashamed to talk about the moral doctrine. Then their diplomatic actions and also economic sanctions and even military threats against Venezuela, among others, prove this. I would argue that the moral doctrine is not necessarily important or timely, especially if one considers the basic fact that U.S. influence and control is more concentrated in the Caribbean rim and does not radiate throughout the whole region, especially South America. But this is still a useful conceptual tool, I think. Even some Latin American countries, we can say in many cases, especially in history, even some Latin American countries may be willing to welcome the doctrine in certain circumstances at some times, if it leads to a certain desired results. I think this is a very normal situation between the relationship among the relationship between between the relationship of U.S. and Latin America, and many Latin American countries are very good at to balance this this old and new relationship with this the biggest country in the Western Hemisphere and also the most important neighbor in the world. So that's all I want to add.
Professor Guo, because Professor Maciero, he said China is not interested in signing the MOU with Belt and Road MOU with the Latin American countries. Do you know why?
I think China is very interested in signing more MOU with the region because this is not just related to the economic engagement; it's also a political support. Or to show a kind of international support, but while we are still waiting to see whether some big countries like Brazil will be interested in signing this deal, this agreement with China. We know the new development is Argentina, and early this year, during the Olympic Games, the president of the Argentine president visited China and signed MOU, which was regarded as a big move by the Chinese side. And until now, this is the biggest country in the region to sign this agreement with China. And I think China values this. This is not just a gesture of something. I also read some report and some interviews with the Argentine ambassador and also presidents when they talking about the MOU with China, and they also regarded this as a very important opportunity for them to expand trade relationship, to expand their exports to China, because according to the World Bank report, they cited the World Bank report that there has been a lot evidence to show that this, be the Belt and Road Initiative actually give some momentum to, or actually increase the partners to export more to China. So they also think about this practical meaning of this agreement. So that's my observation, maybe sort of different from yours.
Okay.
Yeah, Professor Lee, yeah, you also want to say something.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. Well, as the audience asked Vasily, I don't remember. Yeah, asked Vasily the question. Let me complement something. We don't forget that U.S. always consider Latin American country as his backyard, and in the fact, we are. and there's a clear influence of the U.S. over the regions. And as I mentioned in my reflection, the U.S. want to impose its technological standard on Latin American country. And it used the technological standard as a political weapon. And that is the most harmful thing for the Latin American countries. Because as a developing country, we need to choose the best quality of technology and not for the political reason. We have to take decision over the quality of the technology that offer in the market from China, from the United States, or from the European Union countries. That is why I call on the country of the region to adopt the technological neutrality. Well, I think China is not interested in impose their standard. Just call the country to adopt the technological neutrality, because everybody can win with the neutrality. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Professor Lee, for adding that. So I think this principle of neutrality and also autonomy is now very highlighted in Latin America. But then we see this trend of as we all see this the new wave of left-wing politicians gaining upper across the continent. And what's interesting in the discussion, I think, so actually, the audience, if you have more questions, please just feel free to raise or type in the chat room. But if while we are waiting for more questions, I would like to ask. Then, in fact, like the panelists said, the China maybe ideologically more like kind of feel closer to the left-wing politicians. But however, then usually people think that the conservative, like the right wings, they will pay more attention to business. So I would like to, because you also mentioned what drives the China and the Latin American relationship is actually a lot of efforts is put on business. So I don't know whether do you think this left-wing government, they will provide a better business environment for Chinese investments, or actually they will just focus on like a political ideology and this resistance or the balance for in this global power competition. So do you think the left wing, they are also interested in the real business? Maybe Professor Marcelo? Yeah.
Yes, as I mentioned during my presentation, it's expected by the left-wing oriented governments that they will be more proactive. They will try to be more active in the international arena. It's expected from them. And in the past, they have been doing that. But there are internal forces, as well as some of the panelists mentioned, that will be restricting them to do what they wish to do. Okay, and they, even though they are in the power, it's not sure that they will be able to do whatever they want, Then the states in Latin America are moving quite slowly if we contrast the modernization of our states with the modernization of the East Asian states, for example. Then we are moving slowly, and it doesn't matter if the governments are from the right or from the left ideological orientations. The states in Latin America are quite heavy, and they are heavy because, wow, historical facts. And we are still dependent on our own economic structures that are based in exploring our raw materials and commodities, and we have not been able to industrialize. In fact, in the last 30 years or 40 years, we have been deindustrializing, a trend that is completely opposing that the trend that is going on in East Asian countries, that they have been industrializing. And this is what makes our life a little bit more difficult, because we are just changing our economic partners. In the past, we had US and Europe as our main economic partners. Nowadays, we are having China, but with the same structures. We are producing commodities for the China's development, and we are buying industrialized manufactured products from China. Then I would say that moving from one country to the other with the same structure, it won't change much. That it would be good if we are able to interact more with different countries, in this case, the different countries, China, that is the new economic power, and to grow up together and catch up together with other countries, not just reestablishing the old same relations that we have been experienced during our 2 or 3 centuries. And this is, I think, my point. We should find ways to work together and to improve our economic conditions together. Otherwise, we'll be seeing not the same pictures or the same movies that we have been seeing during the last century. Just moving from one political economic center of dominations to another one. And this is what I would like to, in some way, think differently or have insights to improve the situations of both countries, and not replacing one economic superpower to another one.
Thank you. Professor Lee, would you like to add something on how the Chilean new government, from President Gabriel Boric, and how that will contribute to business apart from politics? Hello, Professor Lee, maybe please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, now you can hear me. Okay, well, yes, I think that's a big question, good question. What about what's happening in Chile, in Latin America, as a region as whole? I think the 5 or 6 most populous South American countries are now led by the leftist government. 1, 2, 3, no, 5, 6, no, 6 now. As we can see in Cuba, Venezuela regime, Peru leader Pedro Castillo is a self-professed Marxist. In case of Chile, one of the bastions of the free market policy in the region, the left-wing activism, Gabriel Boric, now is in charge. Colombia, the long considered as bellwether of Latin American politics, elects the former guerrilla Gustavo Petro as a president. And now Brazil, we have Lula return again as a presidency. Well, in the meantime, they have a lot of evidence that the West is declining, and their influence in Latin America continue to mount. At the United Nations General Assembly in March of this year, 5 of the Latin American countries declined to condemn Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have the Bolivia, Cuba, El Salvador, and Nicaragua abstaining, and Venezuela refused to participate in the voting. In that case, many Latin American governments have to refuse to join the West in imposing the sanction on Russia. And this has fueled the speculation that the region is not to replace the Cold War style posting of the no alignment. Well, they reflect that the Western failed as much as the Latin American political development. So the Biden has not maintained the hostility toward Latin American of his predecessor, like Donald Trump. His administration has failed to decline to develop the effective policy over the regional engagement in Latin American countries, as frustrated by with the Biden apparent indifference to them, and his willingness to let domestic consideration, including the looming midterm elections and the politics of state with the large Hispanic constituencies, such La Florida, driven the policy. So I think the future is very interesting. We have to see, we have to research and look very, very deep about the influence of the relation between Latin America with the United States and Chile. In case of Chile, the relation with China is very important, as the relation with the United States. So for Chile, the government, as the President Boric said today in his meeting in Bangkok, he's now in Bangkok for the APEC meeting, APEC summit, he said he received a huge pressure from the United States to not doing business with China. He said, and today is in the newspaper. So for Latin American country, they have a huge opportunity but it's a big challenge for all Latin American countries to deal with the trade war between China and the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Li. And Professor Guo, maybe you want to say something about how the political and economic, how Latin America and China, then they, their relationship focus on politics or economics.
Sure. I think this is true. In terms of bilateral political and diplomatic relations, we welcome the left-wing power because there will be more consensus on political ideas, be more or sort of easier to collaborate and even support each other on many global governance issues. But in terms of economic engagement, the right-wing ruling, it is more convenient for Chinese companies to do business in the region. In some countries where left-wing regimes are in power, we do see a bit more friction in economic collaboration, especially when it comes to companies and projects specifically, which do encounter particular obstacles. For instance, some leftist regimes prefer nationalization policies, and that certainly takes a toll on foreign investors, including Chinese companies. We saw, for example, in Argentina, that the PPP projects that we got under Macri administration were canceled when the left assumed power. The current discussion in Chile about nationalizing lithium mines will also have an impact or even a loss on the investments we already have there. I think that's probably the case we have seen in the past like 2 decades. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us these concrete examples. Okay, so we have the time passed quickly, and we have already reached the end of our session. So it's a very engaging and also very informative and thoughtful discussion during the past 2 hours. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank again for all our panelists, including Mr. Paez, who already left. I think your arguments and your points are very well received by our audience, by the students and the scholars. We do not only have Chinese one, but we have like Vasilis is from Greece and also from other countries. Actually, currently, although there was some like a deglobalization or decoupling attempts, but however, the majority of the world, we are still getting closer and closer. So, and I think China and Latin America, as we can already see in our discussion, we have shared a lot of common interests, and we in our there's a future cooperation. We certainly will move forward, and with the newly elected leaders and with the new policy, we are quite confident of the bilateral ties getting stronger and stronger. And I just would like to then finally appreciate all the help and support by our partners, by the speakers, and we hope this kind of discussion will continue in the future. Okay, thank you very much, and have a good day or good night. Thank you. Yeah, bravo. Hola, obrigado, muito gracias, muchas gracias. Okay, yeah.